I was just getting home from work still in heels, still holding a half-eaten granola bar when I saw the envelope. A thick, formal-looking one wedged between bills and junk mail. It was from a bank I didn't recognize. Inside was a contract I never signed, with my name printed in bold letters, as the cosigner for a $78,000 Ford Raptor. At first, I thought it was a mistake. A scam, maybe. But then I saw the signature, my signature, forged almost perfectly. And next to it, in actual pen, a sticky note in my mom's handwriting. "We knew you'd understand. Kyle needed reliable transportation. You always help. Love you. First payment's due next week." I stood in the middle of my kitchen, heart racing, hands shaking, unable to breathe. They'd done it. My own family committed fraud in my name. And worse, they didn't even bother to ask. Just assumed I'd accept it. Again. I'd spent years helping them, paying off Kyle's student debt, covering mom's dental surgery, wiring dad money just until payday. And I never asked for anything in return, just basic respect, a phone call, maybe a thank you. But this was betrayal in ink. And the more I flipped through those pages, the more I realized this wasn't a one-time mistake. This was a pattern, a mindset, a system I'd been trapped in my entire adult life. So here's the question I couldn't stop asking that night. How do you fight back when the people exploiting you are the same ones who raised you? That envelope didn't just show me what they were willing to do. It showed me how little they ever saw me as a daughter, a sister, a person. And that night, something inside me cracked open. I wasn't going to stay silent anymore. From the outside, we looked like one of those Hallmark families. You know, the type 2-story home with a wraparound porch, dad in a crisp uniform waving from the driveway, mom with cookies cooling on the counter, and 2 picture-perfect kids framed in school portraits that lined the hallway. We lived in Spokane, Washington. Our street was the kind where neighbors still waved, lawns were trimmed like they were competing for something, and every Christmas the whole block lit up like a movie set. We were supposed to be the all-American dream. But inside that house, behind the beige walls and clean carpets, was a family built on control and conditions. My dad, Paul Callahan, was a former Marine-disciplined, stoic, and obsessed with appearances. He wasn't the type to yell. He didn't have to. A look from him could turn the air to ice. My mom, Diane, was trickier. She smiled all the time, brought cupcakes to school events, called everyone sweetheart. But behind closed doors, her love came with a ledger. If you got her a gift, she got you too. If you said something she didn't like, you'd pay for it with silence. Passive aggression was her mother tongue. Then there was Kyle, my little brother, the golden child. He was 2 years younger, charming as hell, and never faced a consequence that lasted more than 5 minutes. When he forgot homework, the teachers were unfair. When he wrecked Dad's car, it was just a mistake. And when he dropped out of college, twice, they threw him a breakfast celebration for finding his path. I got a 3.9 GPA and a gift card to Office Depot. The expectations were clear. I was the responsible one, the steady one, the helper, the fixer. "You've always been so mature, Brooke," Mom used to say with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "It's such a blessing to have a daughter we don't have to worry about." End quote. But what she really meant was, "We expect you to take care of everything." Every time Kyle made a mess, I was the one asked to help clean it up. When he missed tuition deadlines, I was asked to just front it. "We'll pay you back." When he lost his apartment lease for throwing parties, I was asked to co-sign the new one just for stability. And every time I said yes, the bar got higher. But the worst part? I kept saying yes. Because part of me still believed in the version of the family I saw in our photo albums. The version where Dad was proud of me, where Mom said I was her rock, where Kyle and I laughed about nothing on the porch while fireflies blinked in the dark. I chased that version for years, thinking if I worked hard enough, gave enough, succeeded enough, they'd finally see me, choose me. But I was never the favorite. I was the fallback. And somewhere along the way, being the strong one became my prison. Because strength in our family meant silence. It meant swallowing disrespect, disguising pain as patience, and never ever complaining. But that's the lie about perfect families. They don't need to be loud to be cruel. They just need you to stay quiet. And I did. For too long. Until that envelope showed up. And reminded me no amount of obedience can buy you real love from people who only see you as useful. Looking back, it didn't start with the truck. It started with little things. Small, quiet betrayals dressed up as love. The kind that don't make headlines but leave bruises that never fully fade. The first time they asked for money, I was 23, fresh out of grad school. I just landed my first real job in Seattle entry level, sure, but it felt like everything I'd worked for was finally paying off. I remember getting the call on a Tuesday. "Brooke, honey," Mom said, sweet as ever. "Kyle's in a bit of a bind. His financial aid didn't come through, and we're stretched this month. Could you maybe help with his tuition?" I hesitated. It was a lot. More than I had in savings. But then she added, "You've always been so responsible. We knew we could count on you." So I wired the money. No contract, no conditions. Just trust. That became the template. A few months later, it was a small loan to help Kyle cover rent. He'd just lost his job and needed a reset. Then it was Mom's dental bill, just until insurance kicks in. Then Dad needed help funding a side investment in a buddy's business. Each time, I told myself it was temporary. Each time, I convinced myself this would be the last ask. But the asks never stopped. And worse, they were never framed as help. They were expectations. Duties. A silent job description for the role I never auditioned for. Family financial first responder. At one point, Kyle started texting me directly. "Hey, B, need $200 by tonight or I lose the place. You good?" No greeting. No apology. Just assumed access. And if I took too long to reply, Mom would follow up. "He's your brother, Brooke. You know how hard things have been for him. Don't let him fall behind again." It didn't matter that I was barely scraping by on my own. It didn't matter that I was eating canned soup 3 nights a week just to cover my own bills. Because in their eyes, I was the one who had it together. And if I pushed back even slightly, I became selfish, ungrateful, too obsessed with money. Ironically, I was never allowed to talk about my own money, or stress, or burnout. When I once mentioned being overwhelmed with credit card debt, my dad literally laughed and said, "You make more than I did at your age. You'll be fine. Don't be dramatic." So I stopped talking and just kept giving. But it wasn't just about the money. It was how they made me feel guilty for having boundaries. How every no was treated like betrayal. How love became a currency they withheld when I didn't comply. I started keeping spreadsheets, actual spreadsheets, just to track what I'd given, what they owed. Not because I expected repayment, but because I needed some proof that I wasn't imagining it all. That I wasn't just overreacting like they always claimed. Still, I kept telling myself, they're family. This is what family does. But the truth? Healthy families don't keep score. And they sure as hell don't treat you like an ATM with a heartbeat. It wasn't one big explosion that broke me. It was the slow, steady erosion of trust. One request. One manipulation. One quiet betrayal at a time. It was a Tuesday when I found out. Just a regular, boring Tuesday. I was on my lunch break, scrolling through Instagram to kill time, half listening to a podcast about emotional boundaries ironically. That's when I saw the photo. A golden hour group shot, taken in the Napa Valley vineyards. There was Kyle, grinning in sunglasses with a wine glass in hand. Next to him was Mom, dressed to the nines, holding Dad's arm. A banner behind them read, "Paul and Diane's 40th anniversary. Family first, always." I froze. There were cousins I hadn't seen in years. Family friends. Even my aunt from Arizona, who doesn't travel anymore. Everyone was there. Except me. I stared at the screen, blinking, waiting for my name to be tagged. Waiting for some mention. A caption. Anything. But the only thing it said was, couldn't imagine celebrating this milestone without the people we love most for us. My stomach dropped. It wasn't a last-minute trip. It wasn't a quick gathering. This was a planned event. Coordinated, photographed, shared. And I hadn't been told. Not even a text. At first, I thought maybe it was a mistake. Maybe they assumed I couldn't come, or that I was too busy with work. But even that assuming I wouldn't caress Dong in a way I didn't have words for. So I called my mom. She answered on the second ring, cheerful. "Brooke, so good to hear your voice, honey." I didn't waste time. "Hey, I just saw the pictures from Napa. Why didn't anyone tell me about the anniversary trip?" There was a pause. Not long, but long enough. "Oh, sweetheart," she said, voice suddenly fragile. "We didn't want you to feel pressured. You've been so busy lately, and, well, Kyle said you probably wouldn't want to fly down." I hadn't spoken to Kyle in over a week. I never said anything about not going. I didn't even know there was a plan. I said quietly, "You could have asked." Her tone shifted. More defensive now. "It was just a casual thing, Brooke. Nothing formal, and we didn't want to stir up tension." Bye. There it was. That word again, tension. Translation. Your presence might disrupt the image we want to project. I sat in silence as she kept talking, explaining how wonderful it was to have just the right energy, how Kyle gave a toast, how Aunt Helen cried during Dad's speech. I wasn't angry yet. I wasn't even sad. I was numb. Like the part of me that kept hoping for inclusion finally gave up. When we hung up, I stared at my phone for a long time, not knowing what to do. Not crying. Not yelling. Just quiet. And then came the kicker later that night. I got a text from Kyle. "Crazy weekend. Napa was amazing. By the way, Mom wants jewelry for her birthday. Think you can chip in?" No mention of the exclusion. No apology. Just the next request. And in that moment, I realized something. I wasn't a daughter to them. I was a resource. An afterthought when they needed something. A ghost when they didn't. And that was the night the silence turned into something sharper. It didn't erupt yet, but it started to build. Because when someone shows you clearly that you're not part of the family they celebrate, you stop pretending you're part of the family at all. December crept in quietly that year. Seattle was soaked in cold rain, the kind that seemed to settle into your bones and stay there. People were putting up lights, baking cookies, making plans. But in my apartment, the only sign it was Christmas was the candle I lit every night. Winter pine. The cheapest one from Target. I hadn't decorated. I hadn't bought a tree. I hadn't made a single holiday playlist. I told myself I was just busy with work. Year-end reports, late meetings. But the truth was simpler. I didn't feel like celebrating. Not after Napa. Not after being erased. Still, a part of me waited stupidly for a message. A text. An email. A call. Something. The days passed. The 10th of December. 14th, 20th. Nothing. I checked my phone constantly, pretending I was just bored. But every time it buzzed, it was a bank alert, a work notification, or spam from a clothing store I forgot to unsubscribe from. Christmas Eve came like a whisper. I sat by the window with a mug of tea, watching the neighbors across the street string lights around their porch. Their kids ran outside in pajamas, holding cookies for Santa. I didn't cry. I didn't get angry. I just sat there, empty. At 8:42 p.m., my phone finally lit up. Not a call. Not a heartfelt message. Just a group text from Kyle. "Merry Christmas, fam. Don't forget Zoom tomorrow at noon. Mom wants everyone in red." I stared at it for a full minute. No individual message. No apology for the last month of silence. Just a group text, like I was one of many extras in their family sitcom. And then, 20 minutes later, another text. This time from Mom. Hope you're having a restful holiday, sweetheart. Kyle's been looking for a new laptop. Maybe we could go half on one for him. He's really been trying this year. That was the moment it hit me. Not only had they moved on from excluding me, they were doubling down. Still asking for things. Still pretending nothing was wrong. Still performing happy family like it was a seasonal ritual. I didn't reply. I didn't say Merry Christmas. I didn't ask how dinner went. I didn't offer to split the cost of yet another gift for someone who never said thank you. Instead, I texted someone else, Leah. Leah had been my closest friend since college. She and her wife lived 20 minutes away and had invited me to every holiday for the past 5 years. Every year I said no, thinking this year might be different with my family. This time, I just wrote, "Hey, is that offer to join still open?" Her response came instantly. "Of course. There's always a chair for you." The next day, I walked into a house full of warmth string lights, the smell of cinnamon, the soft chaos of people actually happy to see each other. Leah's mom handed me a cup of cider and said, "You're just in time for the good part, no forced caroling, I promise." I smiled, a real smile, maybe the first one in weeks. For a few hours, I forgot about Napa. Forgot the group text. Forgot the silence. And as we all sat down to eat, someone raised a glass and said, "To chosen family." I didn't say anything. I just clinked my glass, quietly, and felt something shift inside. I wasn't sure what would happen next. But I knew one thing for certain. I didn't want to go back. The envelope didn't look like trouble. It was plain. Beige. No logo. No bold letters screaming urgent across the front. Just my name and address, written in my mother's elegant, looping cursive like a birthday card or a thank you note. I found it wedged between a grocery flyer and a utility bill on a cold Thursday evening, just after work. I was balancing Thai takeout in one hand and mail in the other, shoes still on, keys still dangling from my wrist. I almost didn't open it. But something about the handwriting stopped me. That perfectly curved B in Brookish always said cursive was a lost art. I slid my finger under the seal and pulled out a small stack of papers. And then I froze. The first page was an invoice from a dealership Ridgewood Ford, about an hour from Spokane. It was for a 2024 Ford Raptor. Retail price, $78,560. Monthly payments, $1,274. Loan term, 72 months. The buyer, Kyle Callahan. And cosigner? Me. I blinked, convinced it was a mistake. Some mix-up. A typo, a cruel joke. But as I flipped the next page, my heart dropped. There it was, me full name, my address, my social security number, and my signature. Or something that looked like it, scrawled in blue ink across the bottom line. I stared at it for so long my eyes started to burn. And then I saw it tucked between the warranty page and financing agreement, a handwritten note on pink floral stationery. Brooke, Kyle really needed something safe and dependable for the winter. We knew you'd understand. You've always been the responsible one. First payments due Feb unst. Love you, sweetheart. Mom. I didn't know whether to scream or laugh. They hadn't asked. They hadn't warned me. They hadn't even pretended to include me. They'd just done it. They took my name, my credit, my trust, and they turned it into a loan I never agreed to. I sat on the edge of my couch, the papers shaking in my hands, Thai food going cold in its bag on the kitchen counter. Every memory of the last few months, the exclusion from Napa, the silent Christmas, the group text hit me like a brick wall. This wasn't a miscommunication. This wasn't just a favor. This was fraud. And the worst part? They didn't even seem to think it was wrong. Just another extension of what I'd always done. Help. Support. Clean up Kyle's messes. Except this time, the mess had my legal signature on it. Or at least, a version of it. My heart pounded in my chest as I flipped through the final page insurance documents already activated. The truck was real. The loan was live. And legally, I was on the hook. For $78,000. I leaned back against the couch and whispered the only thing I could manage. What the hell did they just do? And in that moment, one thing became painfully clear. I wasn't just the backup plan anymore. I was the target. I didn't sleep that night. I tried. God, I tried. I brushed my teeth, changed into sweats, climbed into bed. But my mind kept looping like a broken reel. My name, my signature, my debt. The pink stationery note replayed in my head on a cruel loop. You've always been the responsible one. No matter how many times I read the documents, the outcome didn't change. They had forged my name, and they expected me to just pay for it. By morning, something inside me had shifted. The shock hadn't worn off, but it had been joined by something colder resolve. I made coffee with trembling hands and opened my laptop. I needed answers. First, I searched. What happens if someone signs a loan in your name without permission? The results were clear and, frankly, terrifying. Fraud, identity theft, financial liability. If I didn't report it, I could be held fully responsible. Legally, fiscally, personally. And if I didn't act fast, the first payment would hit my credit report like a bullet. Next, I logged into my bank account, just to double-check that nothing else had been touched. That's when I saw it. An attempted login from a known device. The day before, a red alert had been flagged on my savings account in the emergency fund. The same account I'd spent years building, dollar by dollar, in case something ever went wrong. Someone had tried to access it at 2:47 p.m. from a device labeled Brooke's old MacBook, the one I'd given to my mom last year. At the time, it felt like a sweet gesture. She'd needed a new computer, and I had just upgraded. I even wiped it clean and helped her set it up. Now, it felt like I had handed them the keys to the vault. I called the bank immediately. A woman named Rachel answered, calm and professional. After I explained what I'd found, she paused, then said quietly, "You need to report this as fraud. Today." End of calm. Her tone wasn't dramatic. It was matter of fact. Like someone who'd seen too many people wait too long. We locked the account, changed every password, set up two-factor authentication across the board. Then I called a lawyer. Her name was Natalie Hart. She came highly recommended, sharp, no nonsense, and practiced in financial fraud. Her office was a converted townhouse near downtown Seattle, full of warm lighting and calm furniture that made me feel, for the first time in days, a little less crazy. I brought everything: the fake signature, the loan papers, screenshots of the bank alert, even the damn pink note. She looked through the file slowly, nodding as she read. Then she looked up and said, without hesitation, "This is textbook financial fraud. It's criminal. And your family doesn't get a pass just because they're family." I don't know what I expected. Maybe a suggestion to talk things out, maybe even a little doubt. But she didn't flinch. She laid out my options clearly. Report the fraud to the bank and dealership. File a police report, if necessary. Freeze my credit across all bureaus. Document everything. I sat there, gripping my coffee cup like a lifeline. Natalie added, "I've seen cases like this before. They count on your silence. They think you'll choose family over yourself." She was right. They were counting on me to stay quiet, to roll over, to absorb the damage again. But this time felt different. This time, I wasn't just angry. I was done. And I was about to remind them that the strong one is also the one they should never have underestimated. They invited me to dinner like nothing had happened. A text from Mom, 3 days after I'd spoken to the lawyer. "We're having roast and wine tomorrow. Just family. 6 p.m. You coming?" No mention of the forged loan. No apology. No explanation. Just dinner. Part of me wanted to ignore it, block their numbers, go dark. But another partone I didn't like admitting still existed needed to look them in the eyes, to see if there was even a shred of remorse. So I replied, simply, "I'll be there." I arrived at 5:59. The house looked exactly the salmon neatly trimmed hedges, porch lights glowing, that same fake wreath from last year still hanging crooked on the door. Inside, the table was already set. Napkins folded, wine glasses filled. It could have been a holiday scene, if not for the weight in my chest. Kyle was there, slouched in the chair across from my usual spot, scrolling on his phone. Mom moved around the kitchen, humming, as if she hadn't just turned my name into collateral damage. Dad stood at the head of the table, glass of scotch in hand, posture perfect like always. "Brooke," he said with a nod. "Glad you made it." I sat down slowly, placing my bag beside me. I didn't touch the drink they'd poured. Mom smiled like nothing was wrong. "We made your favorite pot roast with rosemary." I hadn't liked pot roast since high school, but sure. We made it to the salad course before Dad cleared his throat and said, "Let's talk about this overreaction." He blinked. "Overreaction?" He gestured vaguely toward me. "The car, Brooke. The lawyer. The drama. We thought you'd be mature enough to handle this privately." My voice stayed calm, too calm. "You forged my name on a $78,000 loan." Mom interjected, "Sweetheart, it wasn't like that. Kyle needed help. You know how hard it's been for him." Kyle finally looked up. "It's just a truck. Chill." I turned to him. "You stole my identity. That's not something I'm going to chill about." He scoffed. "You make more money than anyone in this room. You'll be fine." I looked back at my parents. "Did you honestly think I wouldn't notice?" Mom's smile faltered, just slightly. "We thought you'd understand. You've always been so reliable, so level-headed." "No," I said, voice sharper now. "You thought I was predictable, that I'd stay quiet, that I'd clean up the mess like always." Dad set his glass down harder than necessary. "Enough. We are family, and family helps each other. End of." I stared at him for a moment before replying. Family respects each other. Family doesn't commit fraud and then serve pot roast like nothing happened. Silence. The kind that fills every corner of a room and presses against your lungs. Then Kyle muttered, "You've always acted better than everyone. Maybe that's the problem." I stood up. "I'm not paying for that truck. I've spoken to a lawyer. I've frozen my accounts. I've filed documentation." Mom's eyes widened. "Brooke, you wouldn't." "I already have." They weren't prepared for that. For the version of me that didn't fold. As I picked up my bag, Dad said, "If you walk out of here and go through with this, you're no longer welcome in this house." I paused at the doorway. I stopped feeling welcome a long time ago. And I left. No screaming. No slamming doors. Just a quiet decision that had taken a lifetime to make. It started less than 24 hours after the dinner. I woke up to a dozen notifications buzzing my phone like a swarm of angry bees. Texts, mentions, DMs, tags. And at the center of it all, Kyle's Instagram story. A grainy selfie, clearly taken in his truck, eyes red and puffy, with the caption, "Family shouldn't betray you. Especially not your own sister. Some people care more about money than blood." Some things you never get back. The music playing underneath? A slow piano instrumental of Fix You by Coldplay. Of course. The comments rolled in fast. "Stay strong, man. She'll regret it one day. You don't need toxic energy in your life." Some of the names I recognized: cousins, friends from high school, even family friends I hadn't spoken to in years. I didn't respond. I just watched. But that was only the beginning. Later that afternoon, Mom posted a Facebook update, a photo of Kyle as a baby in her arms, and a caption that read, "Being a parent means doing everything you can to protect your children even when others turn their backs. So proud of Kyle for staying kind through all this." No names. No direct accusations. Just vague enough to maintain plausible deniability and sharp enough to cut. Then came the messages. Texts from relatives I hadn't spoken to in months. Heard what's going on. Maybe you could have handled it differently? We're all worried about your mom. She's been crying nonstop. Why bring lawyers into a family issue? I didn't reply. I just documented everything. Screenshots, voicemails, even the passive-aggressive memes mom started reposting. Just because someone shares your blood doesn't mean they deserve a seat at your table. The irony was almost impressive. But the moment it turned from petty to dangerous was when my workplace got pulled in. I was in the middle of reviewing a budget proposal when my boss, Karen, knocked on my office door. "Hey, can we talk for a second?" She looked uncomfortable, which wasn't like her. I followed her into the conference room, heart already pounding. She sat, folded her hands, and said gently, "I just got a call from someone claiming to be your father." I froze. He said he was concerned about your mental state, that you were making irrational financial decisions. He implied there might be a risk with you managing client accounts. My chest burned. I took a breath and told her everything briefly, clearly, without emotion. About the forged loan, the confrontation, the lawyer. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment. Then she nodded. "Thank you for telling me. And just so you, none of us believed a word of it." Relief flooded my chest so fast I nearly cried. But it also confirmed something I had feared. They weren't just trying to hurt my feelings anymore. They were trying to hurt my future, my income, my reputation, my stability. And I knew, deep in my gut, they wouldn't stop until I either gave in or burned. So I did the only thing I could. I locked down all my accounts. I changed every password, every recovery email, every two-factor setting. I blocked numbers, muted names, and unfriended anyone who even slightly hinted at staying neutral. Because this wasn't just a family feud anymore. It was war. And the only way out was through. It happened faster than I expected. 3 days after I filed the fraud report with the bank and sent the dealership a signed affidavit, I got a call from an unfamiliar number. It was Robert, the fraud investigator from the loan department. "Miss Callahan, thank you for your documentation. After reviewing the signatures and supporting materials, we've confirmed the loan was fraudulently co-signed. As of today, you've been removed from the contract." My hands trembled around my phone. "And the truck?" I asked, voice steady but cold. "It'll be repossessed within 48 hours unless the buyer can refinance the loan independently. Given the credit profile, that may be unlikely." Unlikely was generous. Kyle had defaulted on 2 credit cards, dropped out of college twice, and had never held a job longer than 6 months. There was no way he could carry a $1,200 month payment without someone else holding the wheel. I hung up and sat in silence. For the first time in weeks, I felt something close to peace. Not because I wanted Kyle to suffer, but because for once, I wasn't the one expected to carry it. 2 days later, the explosion came. It started with a string of voicemails. The first was from Kyle, frantic, angry, halfway between crying and shouting. "You're a monster, Brooke. They took my truck at the mall. In front of everyone. How could you do this? I needed that truck." The second came minutes later. "Mom, you've humiliated your brother. You've shamed this family. What kind of person turns their back on blood over a technicality?" A technicality. That's what she called identity theft. I didn't reply. I didn't even listen to the rest. I just pressed block and moved on. That night, Kyle took to social media again. A tearful selfie video. Puffed up eyes. Hoodie pulled over his head like a child in timeout. Sometimes, your own family doesn't want to see you win. Sometimes, people you trust sabotage your future just because they're jealous. His followers, many of them still writing the "poor Kyle," train-flooded the comments with sympathy. "You'll bounce back. She was never really there for you anyway." End of section. Keep your head up, King. But something was different this time. I noticed a few quiet replies from people I didn't know, some from mutuals. "You forged your sister's signature. If you really needed the truck, why not pay for it yourself? This isn't betrayal, it's accountability. And just like that, the cracks began to show. Then came the text from Aunt Denise's dad's older sister, who always stayed quiet during family drama. Brooke, I'm so sorry. I had no idea it went this far. I should have spoken up sooner. For what it's worth, I'm proud of you. And a message from my cousin Jake, who hadn't said a word since the Christmas trip. They did something similar to me last year. I didn't fight it. I wish I had. You're brave. I read those messages in the dark, alone in my apartment, surrounded by the stillness of a life I had built on my own. No applause. No grand vindication. But something better. Validation. The golden boy was unraveling not because I destroyed him, but because the illusion that propped him up had finally collapsed under its own weight. And, for once, I didn't have to explain myself. Because the truth was doing the talking for me. It was a Thursday morning when Natalie called. I was making coffee, still in pajamas, the news humming quietly in the background, when my phone lit up with her name. We heard from their lawyer, she said. Your mother hired counsel. They want to settle. I didn't say anything at first. Just let her words hang in the air like smoke. Part of me had expected this. Part of me still didn't believe it. They're offering to pay off the loan, cover your legal fees, and, she paused, they're open to signing a formal agreement barring future access to your accounts or credit. He blinked. It felt surreal. The people who once scoffed at the idea of consequences were now negotiating terms like corporate defendants. My family had retained a lawyer not to sue me, but to beg me not to press criminal charges. Natalie continued, They're scared, and they should be. The evidence is clear. If you wanted to go all the way with this, your mother could face felony charges. I didn't want that. Not because I felt guilty. Not because I had any illusions left about who she was. But because I knew how the story would be rewritten. If she went to jail, suddenly she'd become a martyr. Kyle would post long captions about forgiveness. Distant relatives would turn my silence into villainy. I didn't want that saga. I wanted closure. I'll agree, I said finally, but on my terms. Natalie already had the list ready. She knew me well by then. Full reimbursement of all legal costs. A notarized letter admitting the forged signature. Binding documentation that neither parent nor Kyle would ever access or request access to any of my financial accounts again under penalty of breach. And one more thing. No contact. They could keep their social media sob stories. I didn't want their apologies, or their guilt-laced pleas, or any future surprise visits wrapped in fake reconciliation. I wanted distance. Real, légal, enforçable distance. The agreement took a week to finalize. Their lawyer was professional, but I could feel the subtext in every email. Please don't ruin them. But here's the thing, they ruined themselves. They chose manipulation over honesty, fraud over conversation, and ego over family. And I was done making space for people who saw my boundaries as obstacles. When the papers arrived in my inbox, signed and sealed, I stared at the digital signature for a long time. Diane Callahan. A woman who used to bake me cupcakes with my name written in frosting. Now legally agreeing not to touch a dime of my future again. I closed the laptop and exhaled. No triumph. No fireworks. Just quiet. And for the first time in a long time, that quiet wasn't heavy. It was clean, clear, peaceful. Later that night, I lit a candle, poured a glass of wine, and texted Leah. It's done. Officially. Her reply came fast. Dinner's on us tomorrow. No drama. Just lasagna and bad karaoke. End of. I smiled. I had lost my mother, my brother, and a family that never really saw me. But I'd gained something far better. Freedom. Spring came late to Seattle that year. The cherry blossoms bloomed cautiously, like they weren't sure if it was safe to open. And in a way, I understood. Healing doesn't arrive like a grand finale. It drips in slowly, morning by morning, breath by breath. The legal mess was over. The settlement was signed. My name was cleared. My accounts were locked down tighter than Fort Knox. But emotionally, that took longer. There were moments I still felt the phantom tug of old guilt. Like when I walked past a Mother's Day card display and instinctively reached for one before stopping mid-step, hand frozen in the air. Or when an unfamiliar number called, and for half a second, I braced for Mom's voice. It's strange how grief works. You don't just mourn people when they die. Sometimes, you mourn the version of them you desperately wished existed. But something beautiful began to happen in the space they left behind. I started saying yes to things I used to avoid. Dinner with Leah and her wife became a weekly tradition. We called it No Judgment Fridays, lasagna, bad wine, worse movies. I joined a hiking group, got talked into a paint and sip class, even started dating again slowly, carefully, without apologizing for the boundaries I now knew how to protect. And something else happened, too. People reached out, quietly, gently, like knocking on a door they weren't sure they were allowed to open. My cousin Jake messaged me one night. I saw what happened. You were brave. I wish I had done what you did. An old high school friend, who had gone through her own family estrangement, emailed to say, "Thank you for showing me it's okay to walk away." Even Aunt Denise called. "We always knew you were the strong one," she said. "We just didn't realize how much we relied on that until you stopped allowing it." I don't know if my mother ever truly understood what she did. I don't know if Kyle will ever take responsibility, or if he'll keep spinning stories where he's the victim and I'm the villain. But I do know this. Their silence no longer defines me. I've learned that family isn't built by blood, it's built by choice. It's the people who show up for you when there's nothing to gain. The ones who respect your no, celebrate your yes, and don't need to break you to feel whole. I used to think setting boundaries meant losing people. Now I know it means finding the right ones. If you're listening to this and something in my story feels familiar, if you've been guilted, manipulated, made to feel like your worth depends on your usefulness, let me say this clearly. You are allowed to say no. You are allowed to choose peace over proximity. You are allowed to walk away from people who only come close when they need something. And you are allowed to define family on your own terms. The people who truly love you won't need to forge your name just to keep you. They'll know who you are, and that will be more than enough.